Hello and welcome, and yes, it's my handsome face. It is Tuesday, the 12th day of October. It's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and this is going to be the single most controversial video I ever make. So if anything I say upsets you from this point on, you have been warned. And if you don't want to hear me making a lot of fun of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, you should probably stop watching this now. I'll give you a moment. Okay, if you're still here, that means you're okay with everything I'm about to say. So, consent. All right, I'm going to end the discussion once and for all. This does not come from me. It comes from a source much higher than myself, somebody who works at Wizards of the Coast, in regards to whether 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons is or is not Dungeons & Dragons. Yes, it is. 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons is Dungeons & Dragons. Because Hasbro owns that word. And therefore, this is Dungeons & Dragons. This is also Dungeons & Dragons. Hasbro can put the word Dungeons & Dragons on anything they want, and it is Dungeons & Dragons. Because that word is theirs. They own the IP Dungeons & Dragons. If Hasbro wanted to, they could take this bagel, write Dungeons & Dragons across it, and bam, this bagel is now Dungeons & Dragons. Why? Because Hasbro owns that word, and Hasbro can call whatever the fuck they want Dungeons & Dragons. So this is Dungeons & Dragons. Even though it doesn't say Dungeons & Dragons, it says D&D. And says how to play blah, 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 world's greatest role-playing game, Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook. Yes, I voted. We got giant and flying girl and I don't even know what that is. Some kind of dog on the back. Yes, I put stickers on my book so I know they're mine. D&D. This is D&D. This is also D&D. And now, this is D&D. Because Wizards of the Coast / Hasbro says so. Yes, 5th edition is Dungeons & Dragons. But wait, there's more. 5th edition is not Dungeons & Dragons. No, it is not in any way, shape, or form Dungeons & Dragons, as we all collectively agree upon what D&D is. Because there are certain preconceived notions in the emotional, mental gestalt that is Dungeons & Dragons. And those are the things that Gygax and company put down on paper day one as this is D&D. Alignment, race, class, level, the 6 stats, strength, dex, con, intelligence, wisdom, charisma, armor class, hit points, saving throws. That is D&D. As Gygax Arneson wrote it down. Those are the conceits, the concepts that make Dungeons & Dragons what it is. When Wizards of the Coast started changing those, it stopped being D&D as per the conceptual concept of the agreed upon gestalt of ideas of what makes Dungeons & Dragons. Again, Wizards of the Coast can call this Dungeons & Dragons. Wizards of the Coast can call this Dungeons & Dragons. Wizards of the Coast can call this Dungeons & Dragons, and therefore, by the way that weirdness in the English language, words, recognition, IPs, copyrights work, this is now Dungeons & Dragons because Wizards of the Coast says so. Because that's the name. But 5th edition is not Dungeons & Dragons because, again, there are certain agreed upon conceits, conceptions, ideas within the gestalt that we all collectively agree upon make Dungeons & Dragons as per what Gygax, Arneson, the other guys said, day one, scene one, minute one, alignment, race, class, level, strength, dex, con, intelligence, wisdom, charisma, armor class, hit point, saving throw, stuff. And that we roll a d20. The d20 is definitely in there somewhere. Yeah, that uses d20 too, but whatever. That is Dungeons & Dragons as it was conceived by the people who created it. So the second Wizards of the Coast started changing that, it stopped being Dungeons and Dragons as a concept. The concept of Dungeons and Dragons changed. Therefore, 5th edition is not D&D because it no longer follows the agreed upon ideas that Gygax and company originally set down day one. Because they've changed it. They've changed alignment. They've changed race. They've changed class. They're still changing it. Lord knows what we're going to see next year, much less 2024. We have these things that they posted about how the rules are official as per after Witchlight, and they're going to backwards compatible everything after Witchlight to follow the rules of Witchlight. So according to the rules of Witchlight, I can have a 7'2" halfling with a +2 in strength if I want to, because it says the height and weight should be somewhere within the human averages. Well, there are 7'2" humans on the planet. So by that logic, and by the logic that I can have any race be any height and weight I want now, if I want a 7'2" halfling and put that +2 in strength instead of dex, I can. Therefore, it's not the race as defined by Tolkien or Gygax. The rules for alignment have changed. The rules for class have changed. The rules of race have changed. I'm gonna bet the rules for leveling has changed. Sooner or later, the 6 stats will probably change. They're too hard. We'll get to the they're too hard in a second. Armor class and hit points will probably change. There's already talk about changing hit points because hit points don't really make sense anymore. So 5th edition is not D&D. Now, addressing the 5th edition is too hard that's been going around on Reddit, because there's this train on Reddit that's saying that one of the reasons why Wizards of the Coast is changing it is because so many people say this is too hard. Try figuring out THAC-O and then tell me how this is too hard. Literally, this is D20 plus a number. If you cannot figure out 11 plus 4, you probably shouldn't be playing D&D, because you probably should be taking basic math. There is nothing hard about this game. This is one of the easiest to understand concepts that is this game that has been produced by Wizards of the Coast. There is nothing hard about this game. Yes, the rules in this book are written weird. I mean, I played D&D 5th edition for like 3 years before any of us realized we were doing criticals wrong. And I know during the playtest, everybody got advantage and disadvantage wrong in my group. And in fact, in every playtest group, when we were playtesting it in its first incarnation 5e, and yes, I playtested 5e. So I've been playing it since, 2014? I guess that means I've fallen to... Never mind. Nobody understood advantage and disadvantage. 3 years, nobody understood crits. And then somebody finally read it and went, oh wait, we've been doing criticals wrong. So yes, this is not written well, but it's easy. And this is Dungeons and Dragons because these guys, Wizards of the Coast, say so. And Wizards of the Coast can call whatever they want D&D. But it's not Dungeons and Dragons because it no longer follows the agreed upon ideas that Gygax and company put down. We can say stuff about 4th, how 4th wasn't Dungeons and Dragons, but let's face it, 4th edition was a completely different game. It doesn't really count in the Dungeons and Dragons timeline because it's just so many alien concepts. This still maintains the concepts. Armor class, hit points, class level are still in here. They're just not the way Gygax meant them to be. Therefore, they're not Dungeons and Dragons anymore. 4th, completely different game. I'll take that one to the grave. That 4th edition should have been the Eberron role-playing game, and it would have had a better chance of surviving than it did. Separate topic. Is this Dungeons and Dragons? Yes. Is this not Dungeons and Dragons? Yes. Can Wizards of the Coast call it Dungeons and Dragons? Of course they can. They own that word, which means it is Dungeons and Dragons. Is it Dungeons and Dragons according to the agreed upon ideas of what Dungeons and Dragons is? No, it is no longer D&D. Is this bagel Dungeons and Dragons? It is absolutely Dungeons and Dragons because Wizards of the Coast says so, and now I'm going to eat it.